Are you ready to learn what it takes to be a successful attorney? You're listening to Corner Office with me, Elise Powers. I'm sitting down with some of the most successful attorneys so you can learn how they made it to the top of the legal industry. You'll hear their advice for how you can forge your unique path to success. Hello, Michael Powers.
Hi. Good morning.
Good morning. This is a very unique episode because Michael Powers is, as you might guess, my husband. And I'm very glad that he has been finally convinced to sit in on the podcast because he has all the juice on me, on all of you, on all the ways that we both make our careers and life work together. Michael and I have been together for about 9 years now, and he is an attorney at Katten. Most people don't know about Michael's kind of role in my business. I've learned so much from watching him and observing him and how he interacts with his clients, with his colleagues. I think honestly, like the first time I knew Michael really had it figured out and how he approaches work. And you're going to kill me for saying this, Michael, because when we were prepping for this interview, Michael said, I don't want this interview to be about me at all. And I said, well, buckle up because this whole podcast interview is about you. But I first knew Michael had it figured out because as a second or third year associate, he got the most ridiculous named bonus in the world called the Superstar Associate Bonus. And it's usually given to a senior associate, and he was a junior associate. And a partner in your group has to nominate you for it. It's all the partners within the firm are nominating their associates, and Michael somehow got it at Katten. And he did not brag about this, but I will brag about it for him on his behalf. So I guess I'd like to start there. Why do you think you got that bonus? And we can pretend it's not such a cringy name, but it does reflect who you are and how you've gotten to where you are today.
Yeah, good opener here. Jogging my memory because it was a number of years ago. I think it was a recognition of the amount of time and effort I was putting into the job. I think I got it when I was a second year. And at that point, I really didn't know what I was doing, but I was trying to do the best job that I could. I think there were a few principles behind what, if I had to imagine what the senior folks were witnessing that they wanted to recognize. And I think it was partly this idea of taking ownership over work, especially as someone who's more junior, who you don't necessarily, although you'd want that person to take ownership, you don't necessarily expect it because of everything else they're trying to figure out and juggle. So we can talk about what taking ownership means, because that's a buzzword and can mean a lot of different things. I think it was also a recognition of trying to first work hard. There's no escape. There's no shortcuts in the legal practice. So working hard is definitely an important value. Coming to the job, trying to add value to the team and being a team player, I think is also an important component. So I think overall what they, if you ask the partners who nominated me for that ridiculous award, they'd probably say that they saw someone who was operating at a more advanced level than your typical second year.
Yeah. And I think you nailed it when you said you were putting in the time and effort to take ownership, to go above and beyond. What were your hours? 2,600, is that right?
Yeah, it was insane. It was
insane. Right.
It was not. Yeah. I mean, I was working long nights and early mornings and working on the weekends, and I really didn't do a whole lot outside of work. But from my perspective in the legal, the job of being at probably any firm, but particularly, an AmLaw 200 firm or a firm where the expectation is that you're going to be billing a lot of hours. I saw it as an investment where if I could spend more time in the first really 3 years is the emphasis that I put on it, to spend that time and really not have a lot of other focuses outside of work. And I was, lucky in the sense that at that time I didn't have a family. I wasn't married. So I really didn't have a lot of obligations but for those at work. So I was able to focus more on learning the craft, learning our practice group, learning what I think a successful associate looks like, and really investing that time. And then, as you know, Elise, I've spent, you know, with each year that has passed, my billable hours have gone down, but that's not because I mean, I guess I am working less in the sense of raw hours, but the work that I'm doing is obviously way more complicated than when I was a junior associate. So your job changes over time, and billing 3,000 hours a year doesn't make much sense when you're, I think, at this stage. Other people should be helping you in that regard,
Hmm.
more junior folks. So your hours by themselves are not reflective of the work that you're really doing and taking on.
And for those of you thinking, has Michael Powers gotten soft? Is he like just not taking work seriously anymore? No, let me inform you that just 2 years ago, he was preparing for a trial and he was working so hard. He was so intense, so focused on this trial that God forbid he had to go to the dentist. And he had an appointment scheduled before trial and they had to fill a cavity. And he was so obsessed with maximizing every minute for work that he told them he doesn't have time for them to numb him because he's got to get back to work. So they just drilled into his mouth without numbing. That is the intensity that Michael operates with. I would not do that. I don't care how busy I am. There's no way someone's drilling without as much numbing as possible. He slept at his office as a junior associate under the desk. And I don't think the partners know any of this because they don't have to. It's the result of what all of that led to that has gotten you to where you are today. So if you think about as a junior associate, how did you take ownership? Like, what are some examples of what that looked like that ultimately led you to be thought of for this prestigious award within the firm?
I think coming into the law firm, having no one in my family is a lawyer, and really having no personal familial person I could say, hey, how does this all work? And having very few mentors in the law firm space at that time, I felt like I had to figure things out on my own. The conceptually, I think what really helped was thinking of internal partners as clients. So when you come in as a first year, you're not going to have your own clients, right? And you're certainly not going to have like big institutional clients. So how do you operate within that space? I think you can view the senior folks in the group or the practice area where you're working as your clients. And so how do you treat a client? You're responsive. You are responsible. If they ask you to do something, you make sure you do it and you do a really good job. I think that viewing my work through that lens really helped me, one, just do good work, ask the right questions, be responsive, be timely in my assignments that I was turning in. So that was the basic framework for doing it. I think ownership to me is, there's a trust component that is different than I think the uh, ordinary work of being a junior associate. When someone I think says, "Oh, he or she is really taking ownership," I think they are helping to lead the matter, do whatever they can to get the assignments done, get the work done, give really good advice to the client. But also, there's this trust component where the senior person on the case, when they go home at night and they get into bed, they don't have to worry about what is or what is not being done on this case because you've developed trust and you've been that person.
I would go farther than just you saying you thought of partners as your clients. It was you thought of partners as your clients and you were obsessed with client service. It was, I will do anything needed to make their life easier, to make them feel like they can rely on me. And that meant being responsive. When they emailed, if it's late at night, I mean, granted, with your hours, you were working anyways, so you were responding right away. There was no waiting period, no lag time for them to hear back from you, which just made their life a whole lot easier. I think, I have to say, like, one of the frustrating parts of doing this podcast is that every single guest wants to talk about the same two qualities in every associate that they value. They take ownership and they're responsive. And it's like, okay, we get it. Like, you're stating the obvious at this point that that's important. But I think what it means is I don't have to wait 3 days to get a response from you where I'm just constantly looking at my email. Like, am I going to hear from Michael? Like, I can't move forward until I get this information from the junior associate. So you took that very seriously. I'm wondering, like, reflecting back, you obviously made huge sacrifices in your life. There's a reason you were very single when I met you. Like, you weren't going on dates. You weren't doing anything even remotely fun. Do you think you could have delivered the same results if you were working 1,900 hours a year?
I think at that stage, it would have been very difficult. I think that I purposefully was single during that period for that reason, that I really wanted to invest the time. And a lot of folks who join firms they're not going to feel that way because they either are not in a practice area that they find fulfilling or interesting, or they're not working with people who they necessarily like or that draws them to the work. So luckily I had both of those things going for me, and that just allowed me to invest the time. So maybe, I don't know. It's a difficult question.
From an outsider's perspective, who also had kind of the inside scoop living with you, I don't think you could have it. And the reason, well, let me say, I don't think you would have gotten the superstar associate bonus because you wouldn't have been going above and beyond expectations. Like, that's for people who really go way above what is expected of them. As you know, at the end of every workshop that I lead, participants get to complete this survey on, did you find value in this? What feedback do you have for Elise? And people are brutally honest in these anonymous online surveys, and it can be very painful. You've had to deal with me going through what I call the death spiral. So I led a workshop in Minneapolis recently for new associates, and we talked about responsiveness, reliability, taking initiative, managing your workload, and when is it appropriate to decline work. And one of the participants, the new associates, put in the anonymous survey feedback. I kind of feel like you were suggesting that we need to put like the partner's needs before our own and sacrifice our own personal wants for work, essentially. And I was thinking about that. And, something that's frustrating for me at times is that people take what I say as, you have to do this. You don't have to do anything that I am saying. My goal is to share the things that you should consider if you want to make yourself irreplaceable. You don't have to take everything I say. You could take one thing from a 3-hour workshop and apply it. But this is how you can become the superstar associate. And it's totally fine for most people. The expectation is that most people don't want to make those sacrifices. But I don't think you can get the superstar award, be the one associate in your firm who gets it, if you're doing what everyone else is doing. It's just not possible. So if you're hitting your hourly target, great, you're meeting expectations. But if you want to get that recognition and be seen as someone who is always reliable, always taking ownership, doing these things that partners are constantly saying they value so much and that they wish more associates were doing, you can't just do the baseline expectation. You can't just be doing the same thing others are doing.
Yeah, you have to set yourself apart. And unfortunately, I think being a successful associate is not it's not a difficult concept to understand. It may not be easy, but it's not hard to understand what it takes. It really just means being, in many ways, a good employee. You're, like you said, if your partners that you're working for, or senior associates that you're working for, are your clients, put yourself in the shoes of a customer. What is a customer like? A customer likes to be thinking that its suppliers are thinking of them. So what does that mean? It means you're responsive. If they call you, you pick up the phone. If they send you an email, you respond as quickly as you can. And you may not have a substantive answer, but you say, "Hey, I'm looking into this." And that gives them a comfort level that I was heard and they're going to help me run this down. Because the other thing that is I'm appreciating better the more senior I get is that I really didn't have visibility into as a really a junior associate, is just how much the senior partners or partners are going to have on their plate that they're trying to manage. And at their level, the decisions they're making are typically much more complicated and complex. There's usually not one right answer. It's gray, and so you have to choose between the least bad option. So putting yourself in the shoes of someone like that, it can be extremely valuable to know that there's someone who is more junior, but will help you take the load off, will help you run down the research and be thorough, will help you dig into the facts and consider different variables. So in that those are the types of folks who the senior partners continue to go back to work for, because they have a high degree of trust that they're going to do the right work. And at the end of the day, when they go to bed, they have a comfort level of, okay, Elise is on it or Michael's on it. So that's really critical. But most people aren't doing that. And that's why when someone does that, they do stand out.
And I remember a couple years ago, there was a situation you were in such a busy period with work and you were working with a new associate, kind of delegating them work, and you asked them to do an assignment. They turned it in to you kind of Friday night, and you were reviewing it Friday night, Saturday morning, and it was not at all what you were looking for. And just they completely misunderstood what you were asking. They didn't consider all these different factors, and you emailed back and said, "This is really off base. This is actually what I needed." And throughout the whole weekend, I'm like, did they respond? Did they respond? Did they get back to you? And nope, haven't heard. And by Monday, I'm like, you need to reach out and tell them that they need to respond to you. Like, I would have called the person Saturday morning and said, "Hey, I need your help with this." And I remember you saying they need to figure it out for themselves. I have to say I disagree with that. As a leader, I think you need to set expectations. But that was just a perfect example. And then I think on Monday you said, "Forget it. I'm just going to do this myself. Like, I'm not waiting around anymore." So it's like, as a leader at that point, I think that's when it was an example of you appreciating if they need to be checking their emails on the weekends. And if they see that they turned in something that's not at all what I'm looking for, someone who takes ownership would say, "Oh my God, I've got to fix this right away. I don't want to leave Michael in this difficult position. I take pride in my work." And so that was just an example of like someone who had probably they were much more reasonable in their approach to work, where they're like, "I'm not going to be checking my emails constantly over the weekend. I want to have work-life balance," which I respect, and that's their choice. And also, there is a very direct impact on the people you work with, and it does influence your reputation.
Yeah, and I think when I think about that, there are two concepts that example brings up to me. One is from as I'm becoming someone who's delegating more and needing to work with others who may be more junior than me. There's this concept of, other than just doing the raw legal work, doing the research, digging into the documents, how much time and effort am I going to have to spend managing you? And what I mean by that is following up on deadlines, following up to get a status, And because all those require me to remember every assignment that I've given to everyone, and I may have 20 cases that I'm working on. So you don't want you need to be able to delegate to folks, but when it gets to the point where you have to then manage the deadlines for them and check in to get a status. And I keep bringing this example up, but you go to bed at night and you don't know what's going on with the case, and therefore you need to follow up. That it just adds more time and headaches to the person who's giving out work. And that person is not going to keep going to someone if there's another available option of, say, for example, someone who checks in voluntarily, or just from over time, you have a higher degree of trust that they're going to take care of the work. So that's concept one. The second concept is with regard to choices. Everything in life is a choice, right? So if you don't want to be checking emails on the weekends, and you don't want to be working on the weekends, and you want to check out of the job at 5 p.m. and have more of a 9 to 5 job, ultimately that's fine. No one's going to hold that against you. But when it comes time to get that next really great case or interesting case that's challenging and it's really going to push you to grow, or the time comes for a promotion, don't expect that to be, you're not going to be the first person that's going to be chosen. And you have to be okay with that. Yeah, that's the trade-off. Now, on the flip side, if you are someone who wants to get that great case and wants to put in the effort, you gotta face the cost of that, right? The cost of that is investing more time than the average person would. You may be missing out on opportunities with friends after work or social event. That's a cost. And so you have to weigh the benefit of, do I really want to be that person who, yeah, there's a lot of perks to it. You may be first in line for that promotion. You may be getting that great case. I want that, but am I also willing to accept what that really takes? And I think most people aren't willing to accept that trade-off, and that's fine. I just think people have to be realistic about, you can't then expect that you're going to get all of the great benefits of someone who's doing all of that work. So
Right.
for that person who I worked with years ago, maybe they made that trade-off, and
Hmm.
that's fine, but that can create problems and complications for the senior person giving out work.
Totally. Yeah. And I think that's kind of the message that maybe I need to emphasize more as I'm speaking, is I'm not here to tell you what to do. I'm here to give you ideas of, if you choose to want to go above and beyond and build up a top-notch reputation, this is what it looks like to do that. And there are very real trade-offs. So now that we do have two kids, now that you're married, like, I think about, if we were together when you were sleeping in your office, there's no way you'd be sleeping at your office. Like, absolutely not. I'd be picking you up. I'd be guilting you. Who knows? How has your mindset related to work and hours and availability changed now that you have a 2-year-old and 6-month-old?
Yeah, the opportunity cost of each hour has gone up significantly. So I am way more mindful of how I spend my time. For, at the start of every week, I do this diagnostic exercise where I go through my cases and think about everything that needs or should be done on the cases. And then I really give thought to, okay, who should be doing this? Is this something that I should be doing at my level, or is this something that a more junior associate or even a paralegal could be helping with? And I have to be, I tend to have, just personally, I tend to have, or tend to want more control over the process. And so I think I default to wanting to do things on my own. So I really do have to push myself to delegate more, knowing that it's good for everyone. It's good for me in the sense that I'm then focused on more challenging tasks that are more appropriate for my level, but then it offers the paralegal or junior associate that opportunity to develop and have work and be busy. So that's something that I do, and I really try to force myself to stick to that plan.
What does that like meeting look like? Like I know all the time, every Sunday or so, you're saying, well, I just need to go get organized for the week. I'm going to go up to my office and do that. Like, what are you actually doing? Are you completing, like, working in your spreadsheet and mapping everything out? Are you time blocking your schedule? Tactically, how does that work?
Yeah, I have a few different steps. I first will check my calendar for the upcoming week, know if there are any important meetings and how many meetings, and basically what's the planning that needs to go into those meetings. So, and then then I work backwards from that. So if I have an important meeting, then obviously that gets escalated. So I make sure that whatever the day of that meeting is, I'm ready to go when that meeting happens. And then I have a spreadsheet,
Of
as you
course
might
you do.
imagine.
A spreadsheet
So
for everything.
yeah, the second step is this spreadsheet. It basically has each row is a different case, and then each column is a different week. And so I put in the assignments to the spreadsheet. And what's great about it for me is that I'm a visual person, so it helps me to literally see what are the cases and what level of work has to go into each one on a weekly basis. So and that has been, I've once I thought of that idea to have something like that, I've really stuck to it because it's so helpful. The more senior you get, just the more there is to keep track of. And it would be very difficult to not have some sort of system and still feel like I'm on top of things.
Mm-hmm.
So that scheduling really sets the tone for the week. I know how busy the week is going to be, and I know how hard the week is going to be in terms of if there are really challenging assignments that are coming up. I know that in advance.
And are you, as you go through that process, are you firing off emails to the people who you're going to be looping in to do assignments? Or is it more just like internally you're reflecting and then Monday morning it's go time to take action?
It depends. Sometimes I don't want to blast people with emails asking for a lot of work on Sunday, even though I usually, if it's a weekend email that is not a fire drill, I usually say, hey, I don't need a response. I'm just working on this now. So I'm thinking of it. So it's easier for me to just send out the email. Usually what I do is I draft it and then save the draft and fire it off Monday morning.
Okay, I don't like that approach.
Why?
Let me tell you why. Because I, as someone who does work every weekend, I would be annoyed if people weren't sending me stuff over the weekend because I would like to be able to do it over the weekend. Like I think I understand and appreciate wanting to not like stress out a junior associate and make them feel like they need to do this now. But it's not my job to decide when you want to work. I'm going to operate like normal. And if you don't want to look at it till Monday, fine. And maybe what could be effective is, when there's a hierarchy, maybe you would say to the junior associates, I'm going to be emailing you all weekend long. I never expect you to reply over the weekend unless, I've texted you and said, hey, I just sent you an urgent request. Like, I don't know. I guess that's my take on it. But why do you feel like it's important to not send it over the weekend?
It's a good question now that I'm being pressed on it. I think for maybe in the past, if I say got a Sunday email or Saturday email and the partner said, hey, I don't need this right now, or I don't need this over the weekend, I'd still do it over the weekend. And that's probably
This
just
is why
because
you're so
who,
annoyingly like on top
who
of
I am.
everything. Yeah.
But because to me it would be like, okay, well now the clock is ticking. And so even though the
Uh-huh.
partner said, I don't need this, I would still likely turn it in as quickly as I can to signal, hey, I'm on top of this and I'm willing to put in the hours. So now that I know that about myself, when I send an email and I genuinely don't need it and may not even review it if they sent it to me on Saturday, Sunday, that's probably the reason is I don't want to create this unnecessary uh the fire drill or this unnecessary feeling of, oh, he said he didn't need it, but maybe he's just testing me to get this done as quickly as possible. So that's the reason I fired off Monday. But if I really need it, then I'm not going to hesitate.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm not I think it's very kind of you to not do that. And maybe I'm just trying to make myself feel better, justifying why I send emails at all hours of the day and night, but I think at least like my team knows that I don't expect anything, and if I do need something, I'm going to call you or text you when it's outside of working hours. So, where did you learn or come to appreciate these qualities that you take so seriously? Like your dad, he stopped going to school in what, like eighth or ninth grade. He,
Hmm.
you know, but neither of your parents were in the corporate world. They weren't in the legal world. They they were pretty hands off in raising you. Like, how did you kind of on your own come to realize and articulate the qualities that you've just shared? And then how did you build that discipline and drive?
Good questions. I would say, in terms of figuring out what to do, it was a lot of self thinking, thinking for myself, reading books. I think partly the fact that this was a completely new area for my family and my personal experience, I think made me realize, wow, I need to learn something about this because I'm going into an environment that I really don't know much about. I went straight through from undergrad to law school. I didn't I didn't really have a job before working at a law firm or any type of serious job. So, the corporate environment, the high stakes of the law, I think that motivated me to do reading books, reading articles, etc. And then when I became a summer associate, really focusing on trying to understand what it is to make someone successful. So taking senior associates and partners out to coffee or lunch and hearing their personal experiences, I think that was really invaluable. I think in terms of, and then also a lot of reflecting once I became an associate, seeing things that worked well, seeing things that didn't work well. I would, I would think about the process of the work a fair amount, and I would reflect on it, write about it, trying to figure out, okay, what do I need to do? What adjustments can I make to improve my process in the work that I'm delivering? I think you asked about internal motivation and discipline. I think for me, motivation, you can teach that. So for me, it was my life experience that made me motivated. That's going to be very hard for someone to, I think, understand. But I think the discipline is something that is maybe teachable. And what I mean by that is, for me, what part of the reason that I took this process so seriously is that, one, I wanted to have a career that I found meaningful. And so the law, obviously it's the one that I chose, but I thought that it could really be a meaningful career where you're working on really challenging, intellectually stimulating problems, but then you're working with a client or someone else who really needs to problem solve. So I just thought that would be a good environment for me. I also like the fact that the job, although whatever, I was an associate for however many years, every couple of years your job changes. And that to me was exciting because I didn't want to be in a really static work environment where I just was doing the same thing every day. My job, I've probably had 4 to 5 different jobs in this firm that I've worked at for now 10 years. So that was exciting to me. And then the discipline, I think what made me realize that there's a real opportunity is just seeing how the firm environment worked and the senior associates who seemed to be successful. What it seemed to be is that if you can invest the time and resources and make good impressions and do good work, that can really carry you a long way in terms of the trajectory of your of your career. Again, because you build up a lot of investments in the bank of goodwill. And it's not to say that you can just go off the rails 5 years in, but if you're someone who the senior folks view as, wow, he or she is really good, I trust them, over time that gives you more flexibility, because everyone's going to make a mistake, or everyone's going to go through a case that doesn't end well. And when that happens, I think they just have more flexibility in terms of seeing what you did and understanding that it's not probably because of you or something you failed to do, but it was, difficult set of facts or a difficult client, difficult position that you were put in. So I think that then working backwards, seeing the trajectory of that career, working backwards, it just made me think, wow, this is a great opportunity. The work is interesting. I like the people in the group, and this really could be the career that I wanted it to be.
I think the key takeaway from this whole conversation, I think one of the most notable things about you in general is your intentionality. Even just thinking about, like, you've always thought about this, as you said, the bank of goodwill. And you had this mindset early on of, I'm going to invest early and often to build trust, go above and beyond, so that a few years from now, when there's a mistake, there's an issue, I take a couple weeks off of work, it's not a big deal, because everyone knows I am the most reliable person they've ever met. I am the hardest working person they know. And you earn those opportunities. And I think the other part of your intentionality is, you've mentioned a lot that you did a lot of reflecting, observing and reflecting of the people who were successful, who you admired. What I don't think, people understand is how seriously you take that. You are journaling. You 2 to 3 times a year do what we call is your retreat, where you go to a different city, stay in a house by yourself for 3 days, and just write and think about, what am I seeing people doing that I need to emulate? What do I need to do to push myself harder? Where do I want to take my career, and how am I going to get there? And it takes time. It's an investment, and it comes down to, you are very intentional in every single thing you do. So I've learned about you. Shockingly, I didn't think there was anything more to learn, but the gift that keeps on giving. I just keep learning more. Thank you for doing this, Michael. I know this is totally outside of your comfort zone to talk about yourself, and probably the most painful thing you've ever been asked to do by me. So thank you.
This is harder than any law firm assignment ever.
It is. Yeah. Well, that's what being a husband is.
Yeah. Hopefully the listeners have taken something that will be useful for them. So I'm happy to talk.
Thanks for listening to Corner Office with me, Elise Powers. Be sure to follow me on LinkedIn for weekly tips on how to accelerate your career. If you're loving this podcast, I would be so grateful if you'd click follow on your favorite listening platform. While you're there, give us a 5-star rating. If you're interested in having me speak at your organization, or if you have topics you'd like us to cover on the podcast, send me a note at info@eleviewconsulting.com. That's info@ELEVIEW consulting.com. All opinions expressed by Elise and podcast guests are solely their own opinions and do not reflect the opinions of Eleview Consulting or any law firm. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon as legal advice or the basis for legal decisions.